He looked at me, his eyes trembling. A year ago, he was the one who threw me out. Cold, ruthless, a termination letter in his hand. And now, he's sitting here, in this room, waiting for me to give him orders. I placed the folder on the table, leaned in slightly, and said, "Do a good job today, assistant. Have you ever spent your whole youth building something, only to have them kick you out like you were nothing? Have you ever missed your kids' birthdays, just so your boss could buy another car? I did all of that. I believed, if I worked hard enough, they'd value me. I was wrong. 9 years, I turned a tiny agency in Brooklyn into an advertising giant in New York. I worked 16-hour days, flying coast to coast, missing almost every single evening with my family. There was this one time, my daughter called me on video. Her eyes were sparkling. "Daddy, come home early, okay? I saved you a slice of my birthday cake," I promised her. Then broke that promise. And then one day, right after I landed a $12 million deal, they called me into the boardroom. My boss looked at me, voice flat. "You're no longer aligned with our vision." Right there, on the same table where they once patted my back and called me a warrior, they signed my termination papers. I walked out of that building, empty-handed. My phone buzzed. A text from my wife. "I filed for divorce. The house is no longer under your name." I stood there, on the sidewalk, hands shaking. I opened my phone, scrolled through old family photos. My little girl laughing, her blonde hair blowing in the wind. It had been a week since I last called home. Now, there was no home to call anymore. I let out a laugh. Not the kind that comes from joy. It was the kind of laugh you make when you realize everything you believed in was nothing but a sweet, cruel trap. They thought they'd destroyed me. But they forgot one thing. Clients came to that company because of me, not because of the logo on the building. Want to know how I clawed my way back from rock bottom? There's one thing I've never told anyone. The one thing that saved me on the night I almost gave it all up. And from that night on, I started turning my pain into a weapon. My name is Cole Patterson. I'm 41 years old, Associate Creative Director at an ad agency in New York. 9 years ago, I walked into this company with eyes full of ambition. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I sacrificed just a little more of myself, good things would come. Back then, I worked like a man possessed. Sleepless nights, rewriting slogans, catching the first flight out to meet clients. I poured everything I had into turning a small Brooklyn agency into a giant in the heart of Manhattan. People looked at me and said, "Cole, you're the soul of this company." I believed them. And I kept telling myself, just a little more, and I'll have it all. Rebecca, my wife, once looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Cole, how much do you love this job?" Enough to forget about me and Ellie? I gave her a weak smile. Gently touched her hand. "Just a little more time. Once things settle down, I'll make it up to you." But that little more time stretched into 5 years. I still remember Ellie's birthday that year. She called me on video, her voice full of joy. "Daddy, you'll make it home, right? I saved you a slice of my birthday cake." Her sparkling blue eyes, they made my chest tighten. I hesitated, then said, "Of course, Princess. Daddy will be there." But that night, I stayed glued to my chair in the boardroom, tweaking slides for a pitch the next morning. Rebecca texted me. "She waited for you until 10 p.m. Cried herself to sleep." I set my phone down. My chest ached with every breath. But I told myself, just close this deal, and it'll all be worth it. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a good father. But at least, I believed I was a good employee. A loyal soldier. One night, I came home late. The house was silent. Rebecca was already asleep. On the kitchen table, I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It was paperwork transferring ownership of an apartment into her name alone. I stood there frozen, my throat dry. Had she been planning for a life without me? Have you ever put your job above everything, only to wake up one day and realize your family has quietly walked away? I don't know what Rebecca was thinking back then. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she had already lost faith in me. Still, I kept telling myself, once this project is done, I'll have time to fix everything. I was wrong. In the early years, our old CEO used to pat me on the back at holiday parties, raise his glass and say, "Cole, you're the backbone of this company. Without you, we'd never have made it this far." I believed him. I thought I had built an unshakable place here. Then they brought in a new CEO, Brandon Walsh. Young, polished. The kind of guy who spoke only in nauseating slogans. To innovate, we must be willing to sacrifice old values. I didn't pay him much attention. I thought as long as I kept bringing in revenue, no one would dare come after me. But I was wrong. I didn't realize they'd been planning to push me off the board long before I saw it coming. Brandon came in like a strange wind. Just weeks after he joined the company, he started changing everything. Restructuring teams, eliminating positions he called redundant, bringing in young faces, hair slicked back with gel, mouths full of slogans about thinking big and new energy. I stood at a distance and told myself, it's fine, I'm different. I'm the guy who brought in 40% of this company's revenue. But then, the signs started to show. One Monday morning, I came into the office and found my desk moved to the far corner of the hallway. They said it was for renovation convenience. Internal meeting emails. Stop CCing my name. Those big client meetings I used to lead? Now it was Brandon, and some young face I didn't even recognize. Julia, my assistant for 5 years, was suddenly reassigned to another department. "What's going on, Julia?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "I'm not sure. The new boss said he's optimizing staff." I nodded, forced a smile to reassure her. But deep in my chest, a coldness was spreading. One afternoon, I went to visit a longtime client, the kind of relationship I'd built from scratch. But when I stepped into the room, I froze. Brandon was already there, shaking hands, smiling brightly. "From now on, I'll personally handle this account," he said. I turned and walked away, fighting to keep the anger buried. But inside, it felt like someone was squeezing my heart. That night, Rebecca called me. "Do you remember our marriage counseling appointment tomorrow?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds. "I'm sorry, I have to fly to Chicago last minute for a client." There was silence on the other end. Then her voice broke. "Ellie's been asking me, does Daddy still love Mommy?" Those words, they cut straight through me. What am I even doing? Working myself to the bone, only to have my family slip away too? I tried to shake off the unease. I worked harder, closed even more deals. Every time a contract was signed, I sent the report straight to Brandon, hoping for a word of praise. But all I got were cold replies. "Okay, noted. No thank you." No glance of recognition. One night, after a long and draining meeting, I ran into Brandon in the elevator. He looked at me with a paper-thin smile. "You're doing great, but the times always need younger people to move forward." I clenched my fists, kept my face calm. But in my head, one question echoed. What are they doing? Are they trying to get rid of me? What I didn't know was that they had already set the perfect plan in motion. All they were waiting for was the right moment. I kept telling myself, if I just worked harder, everything would fall into place. I came in earlier than anyone, left the office later than everyone. I took on every tough project. I thought, as long as I keep bringing in revenue, they won't dare touch me. But reality was far more brutal. That day, I'd just closed a huge deal. A $12 million ad campaign with a client in Chicago. On the flight back to New York, I opened an email from Brandon. "Congrats. You're still the man bringing in those impressive numbers." I smiled. Maybe, finally, he was starting to acknowledge me. But as soon as I landed, another email popped up. I opened it. The Chicago account has been transferred to direct management under the CEO for optimal executive oversight. I froze. The deal I had chased for 4 months now had Brandon's name on it. I called Rebecca. I'm back in town. Should I head straight home? There was silence on the other end. Then she said, "Go wherever you want, because this isn't your home anymore." My stomach dropped. "Rebecca, what are you saying?" "I filed for divorce. The paperwork will get to you soon. And this house is no longer under your name." My voice cracked. "Rebecca, don't do this. I just need a little more time." Her voice trembled, but it was firm. "You always need more time. But Ellie and I, we can't wait forever." Last night, she asked me, "Is Daddy still my hero?" "Cole, do you even remember the last time she called you that?" My throat tightened. I wanted to say something, but nothing came out. The call ended. I stood there, in the middle of a crowded airport, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world went silent. I grabbed a cab to the office. I needed to pick up a few important files before heading to my temporary apartment. The office was dark, except for the faint glow coming from the boardroom at the end of the hall. Brandon was there, sitting with a few people from the leadership team. They looked at me with eyes that said I didn't belong there anymore. "Cole, come in. We need to talk." I sat down. Brandon slid a folder across the table. "You've worked hard, Cole, but the company is moving in a new direction. We need people who are younger, more flexible." I opened the folder. Bold letters stared back at me. Termination of employment. I looked around the room. The same people who once shook my hand at holiday parties now avoided my eyes. "Is this a joke?" I asked. My voice was hoarse. Brandon let out a sigh, tapped his pen on the table. "No one is irreplaceable, Cole. And you've already replaced yourself with numbers." I stood up, looked Brandon straight in the eye. "You'll regret this decision." He smirked. "We'll see." I walked out of the boardroom. The door closed behind me, with a heavy thud, like a sentence being handed down. My phone buzzed. A message from the bank. "Your joint account with Rebecca has been closed. 9 years of loyalty, and this is what I'm left with. A termination letter. A broken family. An empty bank account." I thought I'd lost everything. But they didn't know. There was still one thing they could never take from me. I wandered the sidewalks of New York, surrounded by a sea of people rushing past. My hand gripped the folder tight. My mind completely blank. 9 years. I gave everything to that company. My family. My youth. My health. And now they tossed me out like broken machinery. I made it back to my temporary apartment. A tiny room. Mold on the walls. A flimsy window facing a parking lot. I let myself collapse onto the creaky bed. The springs groaned under my weight. My phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca. "Once you sign the divorce papers, the lawyer will contact you." I read it. Over and over. The words blurred in my eyes. I opened my email, mindlessly scrolling through old threads. Then, a new subject line caught my eye. Financial support after divorce. From Brandon Walsh. I clicked. "Rebecca, if you need help during this process, I'm happy to assist. Don't let financial concerns hold you back from your decision." I froze. My forehead burned hot. Brandon, when did he step into my family? I slammed the phone down. The whiskey bottle toppled to the floor. I yanked open a cabinet, grabbed another bottle. Each drop hitting the glass felt like a hammer striking my heart. I took a sip. My throat burned. Maybe, if I drank enough, this pain would disappear. Midnight. I stood on the apartment balcony, looking down at the stream of cars below. My hand clenched the railing so tight, my knuckles turned white. A dark thought flashed in my head. Maybe it's time to end all of this. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up. A video autoplayed. Ellie. She was smiling, holding up a messy little drawing. "Daddy, I drew our family. When you come home, let's hang it up together." A sob caught in my chest. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. A hot tear hit the screen. I can't. I can't let her grow up without a father. I won't. I stepped back. Set the bottle down on the floor. Took a deep, steady breath. A voice rose in my head. Low. Calm. But firm. "Get up, Cole. They took everything from you, but they forgot the one thing that matters most, you." The next morning, I went to see Mike, an old friend and former creative director, who had also been cleansed by Brandon last year. Mike looked at me, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "I thought you'd never leave that chair, Cole." "I thought so too," I said, my voice rough. "But maybe it's time we start over." We sat in a small cafe. Talked for 3 hours straight. An idea began to take shape. A new agency. A team made up of people once dismissed as old values. Mike placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure about this?" "This isn't a game." I looked him straight in the eye. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I thought I had lost it all. But maybe, just maybe, this is the moment I finally found my true self again." Mike and I started from nothing. A rented basement office in Brooklyn. The desks were just pieces of wood nailed together. The chairs wobbled, creaking every time you leaned back. We called it Phoenix Agency, like the firebird rising from the ashes. On day one, there were only 4 of us. Me, Mike, Sarah, and David, old colleagues who'd been pushed aside by Brandon for being too old or too outspoken. Mike looked around the office and sighed. "We're really doing something insane here." I nodded. "Maybe, but at least this time, we're fighting for ourselves." The first 3 months were hell. We spent hours cold calling potential clients. Most said no. Some even chuckled. "Where did you used to work?" "Oh, that agency?" "Well then, I'll just call them directly." My savings dwindled fast. The account balance crept closer to zero. Rebecca sent another message. "Are you going to sign the divorce papers? Or should my lawyer speed things up?" I didn't reply. That night, I lay awake until dawn. What am I doing? Am I dragging these people into a crazy dream that's bound to fail? One evening, I walked into the office to find Mike and Sarah arguing. "We don't have enough money to keep this office running next month," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "We've done everything we could." Mike slammed his hand on the table. "Where's Cole?" "He's the one who promised to bring clients in." I stood silently at the door. Each word felt like a knife to my chest. The next morning, Sarah threw a newspaper on my desk. "Brandon's playing dirty." I glanced at the headline, "Phoenix Agency accused of stealing client data from former employer." My stomach tightened. "He's spreading rumors," Sarah said. "Richard just called me. He's pausing our deal because he doesn't want to get caught in a scandal." I left the office, headed straight to Richard's building. "Cole, I trust you," Richard said, his voice low. "But you have to understand, Brandon has power. If I sign with you, I'll be making an enemy out of him." "Are you sure this is worth it?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I have nothing left to lose." 3 days later, Richard agreed to test us with a small campaign. We worked day and night, stripped everything down to the essentials, pushed out the boldest ideas we could. When the campaign exceeded expectations, Richard sent me a short email. "Good. I'll recommend Phoenix Agency for a long-term contract." That night, we sat in the office together. No words. Just raising cold cups of coffee. Mike chuckled, his voice hoarse. "Maybe we still have a shot." I nodded. My eyes sharp now. Not just a shot. This is the beginning. I thought we were finally on the right track. But what I didn't know was that Brandon was already preparing. A killing blow, ready to crush everything we'd built. Phoenix Agency was finally showing signs of life. The contract with Richard opened doors to new opportunities. A few smaller clients started showing interest too. We worked day and night, living off coffee and fragile hope. But just when I thought things were getting better, Brandon made his move. That morning, Mike burst into the office, his face pale. "Cole, we're in serious trouble." He threw a thick folder onto the desk. "Brandon has filed a lawsuit against Phoenix Agency. He's accusing us of stealing client data from the old company." I opened the folder. My heart pounded in my chest. It was packed with fabricated evidence. Sarah clenched her fists. "If this goes public, every potential client will back out. And we'll be dead before we even get off the ground. He doesn't just want to crush our careers. He wants to break our will." That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Her voice trembled. "Cole, do you know what Brandon offered me?" I gripped the phone tight. "What did he say?" "He promised financial support for me and Ellie if I side with him in the lawsuit." I froze. "Rebecca, what are you saying?" "I didn't agree. But I'm scared, Cole. I'm scared of what Brandon might do if I say no." My hands shook. The veins in my arms stood out. In my head, a voice screamed, "He's driving me into a corner, even using my family against me." The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was deep, cold. "Cole Patterson, if you want to end this lawsuit, meet me. I have what you need." We met at a rundown cafe on a quiet street corner. An older man sat there, hood pulled low over his face. "Do you know why Brandon wins every fight?" he asked. "Because he'll do whatever it takes," I replied. The man smiled faintly. "Exactly. But this time might be different." He slid a small USB drive across the table. "This contains Brandon's illegal transactions. You know what to do with it." I held the USB in my hand. It felt heavier than it should. If I used this, I could bring him down. But then what? Would I become just like him? Another filthy player in a dirty game? Would I still deserve to look my daughter in the eye? That night, I sat alone in the dark office. My hand gripped the USB so tight, my knuckles turned white. Mike walked in, his voice low and heavy. "What are you going to do, Cole?" "Use it? If you do, you'll become Brandon 2.0. I closed my eyes. Every word cut through me like a blade. I was standing at a crossroads. Should I strike back at any cost? Or hold on to the little humanity I had left? I sat alone in the office. The USB lay on the desk, an invisible weight pressing down on me. Mike was right. If I used it, I could take Brandon down. But if I did, I'd become a different version of him. Rebecca called. Her voice trembled. "Cole, I know you're trying, but Ellie needs a father she can be proud of, not a man who teaches her to win at any cost." I said nothing. Her words cut deep, like a blade twisting in my chest. The next day, Brandon held a flashy press conference. He announced the lawsuit against Phoenix Agency, calling us idea thieves and a threat to the integrity of clean advertising. My face splashed across newspapers, framed by vicious headlines. From creative director to industry saboteur, Cole Patterson, the man who destroyed his own career. That afternoon, Rebecca called again. Her voice cracked, barely holding together. "Cole, Brandon came to see me. He said, if I help him win this lawsuit, he'll make sure Ellie and I keep the house. He promised financial support for us, if I side with him." I froze. "Rebecca, what are you saying?" "I didn't agree. But Cole, he's controlling everything now. You, me, all of it." I set the phone down, my hands trembling. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. He's already destroyed my career, and now he wants to rip apart my family too? That night, I sat alone in the pitch-black office. My hand clenched the USB so tight, my knuckles turned white. I slammed the family photo frame against the floor. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. I dropped to my knees, picking up the broken pieces, blood seeping from my hands. A single drop landed on Ellie's smiling face in the photo. I've lost everything. Do I sell my soul too, just to save what's left? The next morning, I got a call from the man who had given me the USB. "You're sure about this evidence?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said, his voice low and steady. "If you release it, Brandon will collapse. The whole world will see his true face." I stood there, staring at the USB in my palm. I had to make a choice: to become a destroyer, in order to save Phoenix, or to hold on to the last fragile piece of my conscience. I stared at the USB on the desk. Just one simple move: pull up the files, send them to the press, and Brandon would fall. But then what? I'd win. But what would I have left? That night, I called Rebecca. "How are you and Ellie holding up?" Her voice broke as she spoke. Ellie asked me, "Is Daddy still the good man I thought he was?" I froze. Not a single word could make it past my throat. The next morning, I stood outside the building, where Brandon was holding his big press conference. He stepped out of his luxury car, flashing a fake smile for the cameras. "I'm here to protect the integrity of this industry." Every word from his mouth felt like a blade twisting in my chest. I gripped the USB in my hand and walked into the packed conference room. All eyes turned to me. "Cole Patterson? You've got the nerve to show your face here?" Brandon sneered. I straightened my back. "Yes, I'm here to end this." I placed the USB on the table. The room went silent. In my hand is proof that Brandon Walsh engaged in illegal transactions, using his power to manipulate this industry. Gasps echoed around the room. Brandon's face turned pale. He clenched his fist, stepped closer, and growled, "You think you can bring me down? Patterson, you don't play dirty." "But I do. If you walk out of this room with that USB, I'll bury you alive. If I don't do this, Phoenix will die. My team, the people who believed in me, will lose everything. But if I do, what will I be teaching Ellie? That victory matters more than integrity?" I heard Ellie's voice in my head. "Daddy, I want to grow up to be a good person, just like you." I looked Brandon in the eye, my gaze cutting through the mask he wore. "You can break me, but you'll never break who I am." I took a deep breath. "And I will not become you." I lifted the USB high and snapped it in half, for everyone to see. Snap. The room fell completely silent. I don't need to win this fight by getting my hands dirty. I just need to hold on to the last good part of me. For Ellie. And for myself. Brandon froze for a second, then laughed loudly. "You just threw away your only chance to save yourself. How stupid are you, Patterson? You think that's noble? No, you just signed your own death sentence." He leaned in, whispering in my ear, "Get ready, because I'm going to erase you from this world." I gave him a faint smile, my voice low and steady. "Maybe so. But now, I can look my daughter in the eye without shame." I turned and walked away, ignoring the chaos erupting behind me. For the first time in years, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I thought I had lost. But in truth, he's the one digging his own grave. I walked out of the conference room, the sound of shouting and camera flashes echoing behind me. The New York wind hit my face, sharp and bitter. Inside, I felt hollow. And yet, strangely, there was a hint of relief. Rebecca called. "Cole, what did you just do?" I couldn't. "Teach Ellie to win at any cost," I said, my voice hoarse. She was silent for a long moment, then softly whispered, "Maybe. That's the man I fell in love with." 3 days later, Brandon struck back. He filed a new lawsuit, demanding $2 million for defamation and damaging the company's reputation. Phoenix Agency collapsed overnight. Mike called me, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Cole. I can't keep going. My family, they need me to be stable." Sarah sent a short text. "Thank you for giving me hope. But I'm not strong enough to keep fighting." Once again, I was alone. That night, I sat in my cramped motel room, the neon sign outside flickering endlessly. I stared at my trembling hands. Empty. On the table, a photo of Ellie smiling by the window. A hot tear slipped down onto my hand. I failed. Again. Was it worth it? Refusing to win dirty, only to watch everything fall apart. I went to see Rebecca. I just want to see Ellie. One more time. She led me into the room. Ellie was drawing. When she saw me, her face lit up. Daddy? You're home? I pulled her into my arms, my heart twisting tight. Daddy, are you still my hero? She asked, looking up at me. I swallowed hard. Daddy will try to be worthy of that. Ellie smiled brightly. She wiped my cheek with her tiny hand. Don't be sad, Daddy. I'll draw you a shield. To protect you. That evening, I stepped out of Rebecca's house. A strange man was waiting outside. Who are you? I asked, my voice wary. He smiled. I'm Matthew Hayes, former CEO of a major corporation. Brandon destroyed me the same way. He's destroying you. I froze. Why are you here? Because you stood tall, when you could have chosen to kneel. Men like Brandon only win when we let fear consume us. I narrowed my eyes. Why should I trust you? How do I know? You're not just another Brandon? Matthew gave a soft chuckle. I didn't come here to make you trust me. I came to give you a choice. He handed me a business card. Meet me tomorrow. I think we can start over. I thought I had lost everything. But maybe that loss has opened a new path. The next morning, I sat in a small cafe where Matthew had asked to meet. Weak sunlight slipped through the window, casting soft light across the worn wooden table. Matthew arrived. He placed a thick folder on the table. This is a list of people Brandon has crushed. Like you. Like me. They lost. But deep down, they still burn with the hunger to start again. I opened the folder. Faces I didn't recognize stared back at me. Yet there was something familiar in their eyes. A quiet resilience, a spark buried beneath the wreckage. Why are you doing this? I asked. Matthew drew in a long breath. Because I've been where you are now. I broke. And back then, no one reached out a hand for me. I won't let that mistake happen again. You can say no. But if you say yes, we'll build something no one can ever destroy. I looked at him. Part of me still suspicious. But another part felt a small flame stirring to life. That evening, I sat alone in my cramped motel room. On the table lay Ellie's drawing, a giant shield wrapped around me and her. I traced my finger across it, whispering, Daddy's going to try one more time. But this time, Daddy's not fighting just for himself. 2 weeks later, Matthew and I began gathering the people on that list. They arrived with cautious eyes, worn faces, like people afraid of being betrayed again. Linda, a creative director Brandon had forced out, stood up. You've failed before, Cole. Why should I trust you now? I froze. Then met her gaze squarely. You don't have to trust me. Just trust this. You're strong enough to start over. The room fell silent. Linda sat down, her eyes softening. I can't promise we'll win, I said, my voice low. But I can promise this. We'll do it the right way. We'll build a place where no one can steal the value of who we are. Linda let out a shaky sigh, her eyes glistening. It's been so long since I felt even a flicker of hope. David, a developer Brandon had robbed of his project, spoke quietly. Hope isn't something someone gives you. It's something you find when you're brave enough to stand up again. His words rippled through the room, binding broken hearts like thread through torn fabric. That night, I called Rebecca. Do you think I could take Ellie out this weekend? She paused, then said softly, I think Ellie would love that. For the first time in months, I laughed. It wasn't a perfect laugh. It cracked, laced with the salt of tears. But deep inside, there was hope. I once thought I'd lost everything. But maybe failure isn't the end. Maybe it's where a new story begins. A year has passed. I'm sitting on an old wooden bench in Central Park, watching Ellie chase the falling golden leaves. Her laughter rings out, so pure it melts away pieces of the scars still lingering in my heart. Phoenix Agency no longer exists. That name sank with a chapter of my life. But something else has begun to bloom. Together with Matthew and the people Brandon once crushed, we built a small community, a place where anyone could start over, even with nothing. No fancy offices. No million-dollar contracts. Just people believing in each other and in themselves. The other day, I saw Brandon on TV. He was on stage, holding a golden trophy, his smile wide under the blinding flash of cameras. Reporters shouted his name. My chest tightened for a moment. There was something cold in it, but also something strangely warm. He's still up there, at the height of power. And me, down here at the bottom. But maybe his power no longer defines me. That evening, after Ellie had drifted off to sleep, I sat at my small desk. Her drawing, a giant shield wrapped around the two of us, still hung neatly on the wall. Rebecca sent a message. Thank you for keeping your promises to Ellie. She told me, Daddy is still my hero. I stared at her words and smiled. It was a fragile smile, cracked, laced with the salt of old wounds, but deep within it, there was hope. The next day, I met with my new partners. They were people who had fallen, like me. But now, there was fire in their eyes, a fire I thought had long been extinguished. Linda, the one who once asked, "Why should I trust you?" stood and said, "We're not rebuilding to win. We're rebuilding to remind ourselves we are worthy." Her words hung in the air, like a quiet vow shared between hearts once torn apart. Ellie ran up to me, wrapping her little arms tightly around my waist. "Daddy, can I draw you another shield?" "Because I think you still need protecting." I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you, Ellie. But now, Daddy isn't afraid anymore. Some things are lost forever. But maybe it's the very act of losing that teaches us to cherish what remains. I've learned that standing back up isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about finding yourself again. Have you ever fallen? And if you have, who will you be when you stand back up?